Biddy Early, just very briefly, was one of the most famous Clare women who ever lived. She lived from 1798 to 1874. I included a couple of stories about her in the black book there. I have a book entirely about her, but unfortunately it's out of print and the idiot publishers in Ireland, if a thing works, they won't do it. That seems to be the way things go here. It's gone to 9 printings, but you know, if a thing sells, don't do it. That's the motto. Now, Biddy was a clairvoyant. She was a healer. She was a woman who, if you had trouble with the fairies, now the Irish fairies, remember, are serious business. But if you had trouble with the fairies, you went to Biddy and she would put you right. For example, if you built your house on a fairy path, if you built to the west, which you were never supposed to do, you're asking for trouble. Things like that, Biddy would put you right. And most of the stories about Biddy are serious stories because look, illness, disease of various kinds is not fun. As doctors or hospitals or whatever will tell you, it's not a funny business. But Biddy, obviously, since there was always about a quarter of a mile of people at her cottage, every day, every day, every day, she must have been a very strong person to put up with that. She must have had a sense of humour, otherwise she'd have gone crazy with people's troubles down on her all the time. And I think she did have a sense of humour, because one of the stories that's told again and again about her, in various forms, but the same basic story, is this one. At that time, in the mid-19th century, you had to pay rent to the landlord or his agent. And if you didn't pay your rent every 6 months, half yearly, you know what would happen?
Eviction.
Out. You'll be evicted. And if the landlord's agent wanted your little property for his own friends, you know what would happen? He'd probably send in the crowbar brigade. And the crowbar brigade explains itself. He would get your house demolished. So that it'd have a clear, well, Rory would understand better than me, you know, the technicalities of the law. But the law at that time was pretty much simply against the tenant until later on in the 19th century. They'd clear your plot entirely. The law was on the landlord's side. The tenant didn't have many rights at the time. Now, there was a man out near where I live, in Crusheen. He was like the rest of the small farmers, small tenants. He had only a couple of acres and probably a big family. And no money to pay the rent, and the rent day was coming up. All he had was 2 pigs. And he had fattened up the pigs, hoping that he'd be able to sell them and have enough money to pay the agent. And the agent came looking for the money to pay the rent. Now, his problem was, where would he sell the pigs to get the best price? Not Ennis. There was a bacon factory in Ennis that time, but Ennis was only a small town, a 3-street town. That's all it is today, basically. It has spread out a bit, it has spread out, but it's a 3-street town. O'Connell Street, Abbey Street, and Parnell Street. It's still the same 3-street town as it always was. As I said, it has spread out, but otherwise it's the same. So he decided he'd take his pigs to Limerick, because there was a big bacon factory in Limerick at the time, Shaw's Bacon Factory. Now, in fact, Shaw's is gone, but the name still survives in one thing. If you do time in Limerick jail, you do time at the back of Shaw's. At the back of Shaw's. Limerick jail was at the back, is still there, and it was at the back of Shaw's Bacon Factory. So if you want to throw that at somebody, you can still say, were you at the back of Shaw's? Were you in Limerick jail? So, in fact, he decided he'd take his pigs to Limerick to see could he get a better price there. The only bother was, from there to Limerick is 32 miles. And, as you know, pigs are bad walkers. short little legs. And fat pigs are very bad walkers. So the poor man, no, the railway was there, but the poor man had no money. That was his problem in the first place. And his neighbours would have willingly given him the money, but they had no money. They were all poor people. Now, what am I going to do? He decided he'd take a shortcut across country. Crusheen, Tulla, Kilkishen, and on and on and on, and come out at Setwright's pub below on the main road and walk into Limerick from there. It would cut off 12 miles off of his journey at least. So he set out the evening before and he started to walk. Now that way he'd be able to walk him a couple of miles, take a break, and walk him a couple of more miles, take a break, take it nice and handy like that. And he'd still hope to get there in time. But there was a small problem, like I told you there a moment ago. In those days, a different country entirely than we have today. Because in the darkness, how would you know where you're going? He was all right from Crusheen to Tulla. That was fine, he knew that. And he knew from Tulla to Kilkishen, yeah, because remember, people in those days were very, very local. People didn't travel much from their own area. He knew from Tulla to Kilkishen, but the darkness was on him then. And there was no signposts. No signposts in crossroads at the time. You had to know your way, that was it. So we got in here, he got as far as Kilkishen and pitch dark. And most people were gone to bed. So Lord, the pigs were leading him after that. And sure the pigs led wherever they were going, and he was more or less, hoping for the best. And by morning, where in the name of Christ did he find himself? Only at Kilbarron, near Fecal, completely out of his way. He should have gone more south, he was gone north entirely, and the poor old pigs were, they fell, and they were out. No matter what he did, he could kick them, he could call them, he could pull them down. What am I going to do? I'm going to be thrown out. And he went off the stage entirely. And a man came the road, a local man. He said, "What's wrong with you, poor man?" "Oh, Jesus, what am I going to do? Why am I being thrown out?" "Shh, shut up a minute. Why don't you go to Biddy?" "Biddy who?" "Biddy who? Yes, Biddy Early, of course. But and he had heard of Biddy. Sure, everybody had heard of Biddy. And he said, "Where is she?" "Over the road there, about 500 yards up the height there. Where her house is today, where the ruins of her house are today. My pigs, look," he said, "I'll mind your pigs." There wasn't much minding in the pigs, they were down and that was all about it. So he said, go on, you'll be in time. And he went, and lucky for him, it was early in the morning. And there was only 2 people ahead of him. No, it was later in the day, he'd be taking his place in the queue.